On a distant planet, at the very edge of known space, 3 people have just crash landed. Their ship is wreckage, their supplies are minimal. The world around them is vast, uncharted, and absolutely indifferent to their survival. They'll need to build shelter, grow food, and defend themselves from the elements, the local wildlife, and whoever else might be out there. It sounds like the opening of a serious survival drama, and it is. But it's also the opening of a story where one of those survivors might, at any moment, snap because they had to eat a simple meal while standing up. No table, just the cold, disrespectful floor. And in their ensuing rage, they might punch a vital piece of machinery, start a fire, and doom the entire colony. All because you forgot to build a chair. This is Rimworld. Rimworld is a game that has, over the past decade, quietly become one of the most beloved and deeply weird simulations on PC. At first glance, it's a colony management sim. You build, you farm, you research, you fight, you survive. But that description misses the point entirely. Rimworld isn't a game about winning or losing. It's a game about stories. Specifically, it's a game about terrible, hilarious, heartbreaking, and often deeply stupid stories that just happen to involve a group of digital people trying not to die. But here's the trick. Rimworld doesn't just let things happen randomly. It has a puppet master pulling the strings behind the scenes. The game is driven by an AI storyteller that is more than a difficulty slider in disguise. It is also an actual system that watches your colony, assesses your situation, and decides what events to throw at you next in order to create the most interesting narrative possible. There are 3 default storytellers, and each has a distinct personality. Cassandra Classic is the traditionalist. She follows a classic narrative arc, rising tension, giving you breathing room, then pushing again. She wants your story to have structure. Phoebe Chillax is the one who seems nice at first. She gives you long stretches of peace, plenty of time to build and expand. But be warned, at higher difficulties, Phoebe hits just as hard as anyone. She just waits longer between punches, letting you get really attached to your colony before she burns it all down. And then there's Randy Random. Randy doesn't care about narrative structure. Randy doesn't care about fairness. Randy operates on vibes alone. He might send a manhunting pack of squirrels one day, followed immediately by a bulk goods trader, followed by a psychic drone that drives your entire colony into a homicidal rage. Randy's philosophy is simple. The world is random. Stories should be too. Playing with Randy means accepting that you might get 3 disasters in a row, or you might get a year of peaceful prosperity followed by a meteor that lands directly on your only doctor. It's not fair, but it's never boring. This storytelling engine is what elevates Rimworld above other colony sims. It's a simulation of drama, and drama, as it turns out, is often pretty funny. Take for example the mood system. Every colonist has a mood meter that rises and falls based on their circumstances. Good food, nice surroundings, a comfortable bed, all of these boost mood. But the list of things that can lower mood is where the game's sense of humor really shines. Colonists get upset if they eat without a table. They get upset if they're forced to wear tattered clothing. They get upset if they're in darkness. They get upset if someone they don't like simply exists in the same room and breathes the same air at the same time as them. And when their mood drops low enough, they experience what the game aptly calls a mental break. Mental breaks come in many flavors. Some colonists will simply wander in a daze for a while. Others will hide in their rooms and refuse to come out. Some will go on a food binge and eat your entire winter supply in one sitting. And some will go berserk and start attacking anything in sight, including your precious, irreplaceable equipment. I have watched colonies crumble into dust because one guy had a rough day and decided to express his feelings by punching a defense turret until it exploded. Or decided to go off on a sad wander while everyone else was shot to bits. All because I forgot to put a chair in the dining room. Or my somewhat inexperienced chef gave the whole colony food poisoning with a batch of food he cooked the previous year, which I stuck in the freezer. Talk about a ticking time bomb. Then there's the wildlife. Rimworld is populated with all sorts of animals, from the mundane to the utterly ridiculous. You can tame them, you can train them, you can breed them. You can also, if you're so inclined, form deeply inappropriate emotional bonds with them. Colonists can bond with animals, gaining a permanent mood buff as long as their beloved pet is alive and well. But if that pet dies, the colonist suffers a massive mood penalty and may spiral into that same berserk rage that ends colonies. So you have to make choices. Do you let your best sniper keep her pet hare, knowing that if a raid ever targets that hare, she might lose her mind mid-combat? Or do you quietly arrange an accident and hope she doesn't find out? The game won't judge you either way. It just watches. And of course, there's the elephant in the room, or rather, the hat in the room. Rimworld has a fully fleshed out crafting system. You can butcher animals for meat and leather. You can tailor that leather into clothing, and the game, in its infinite moral neutrality, does not distinguish between animal leather and more questionable leather. So yes, you can fashion the raiders who attack your colony into armchairs, couches, or cowboy hats. The game even tracks the quality of these items. One of these leather armchairs crafted by a skilled tailor might be excellent. It might be masterwork. It might be legendary. And somewhere in the Rimworld community, there is a player whose entire economy is built on exporting stylish, ethically questionable headwear to passing trade ships. This is the magic of Rimworld. It's a game that takes itself seriously enough to create genuine tension and drama, while simultaneously being completely aware of how absurd its own systems can be. It's a story generator that treats your worst impulses as simply plot points. And it's only just getting started. Because behind all of this chaos, behind the table-induced tantrums and the hat-based economies, there's a deep, intricate simulation waiting to be explored. The storytellers, the mood system, the wildlife, they're just the surface. Because this game, in its infinite clarity and, as I've stated before, moral neutrality, wants you to remember Barry, the miner who lost his mind over furniture. It wants you to tell your friends about the time your best doctor had an affair with the chef and then had to operate on the chef's wife. It wants you to share the legend of the thrumbo that ate your entire corn harvest and then died of food poisoning, leaving behind a mountain of valuable fur that funded your colony for the better part of a year. But all of that is just the opening act. Because beneath the humor, beneath the absurdity, beneath the questionable leather cowboy hats, there's a proverbial heart beating with surprising complexity. The storytellers, the mood system, the wildlife, they're the public face of a much deeper simulation. And to really understand Rimworld, to understand why players have sunk thousands of hours into this game and still come back for more, we need to look under the hood. We need to talk, in general terms, about the systems that actually make this story generator so memorable. The work, the combat, the colonies that thrive and the colonies that burn. Because let me tell you, Rimworld is a game about surviving on a distant planet, yes, but it's also about building something that matters to you, watching it almost fall apart, and then building it back up again, and again, and again. And somehow, every single time, the story is different. Rimworld is a strange case in the world of game aesthetics, I think. It's not going to win any awards for graphical fidelity, as it's not pushing pixels or flexing rendering techniques. On a purely technical level, it's a fairly simple, top-down, two-dimensional game with a somewhat flat, illustrated style. And yet, there's something about it that just works. Something that makes your little pawns, as they are referred to here, feel like they belong in this world. The goal is clarity. In a game where you might be managing a dozen colonists, a handful of animals, a flock of chickens, a walking explosion waiting to happen, a raid of 20 enemies, and a sprawling settlement, every single visual element has to be readable at a glance. You need to know instantly who is who, what they're wearing, what they're doing, and which side they're on. And the art certainly delivers. Pawns are simple, surprisingly expressive little figures with distinct hairstyles, body shapes, and clothing. You can spot your best shooter easily, thanks to the ridiculous cowboy hat you gave him, even though nothing screams cowboy more than a 20-barreled portable war crime. You can identify a raider because their color palette is different, more hostile. You can tell at a glance whether someone is drafted, downed, or just having a really bad day. The user interface in Rimworld is one aspect I'd like to briefly touch on. The screen can get busy. It has to be. There's a lot of information to convey, especially if you'll be running a bunch of quality of life mods like the ones I prefer to use. The UI, however, manages to be dense without being overwhelming. The architect menu in the bottom left gives you access to every buildable object in the game, neatly categorized. The resource list in the top left tracks every scrap of wood, steel, and questionable scrap of leather you've got stockpiled. The colonist bar across the top shows you every pawn in your colony, their mood, and their health. And it's all transparent. It floats over the game world, letting you see your colony while you manage it. It's the kind of design that seemingly disappears when you're playing, which is exactly what a good UI should do. You stop seeing the menus and just start using them. The game has a full day-night cycle, and the way light influences gameplay is surprisingly sophisticated. During the day, the world is bright and clear. As the sun sets, however, long shadows stretch across the ground cast by every tree, rock, and wall. Darkness affects mood. It affects visibility. It affects combat. Enemies are harder for your pawns to spot, and vice versa. This simple yet sophisticated lighting system adds a whole layer of tactical depth to the game. Do you send out a night raid? Do you keep your colonists indoors after dark? Do you invest in torches or standing lamps to keep everyone's spirits up, knowing that if some outside force breaches your walls, your colonists will be very visible? The weather, on the other hand, is an entirely different matter. Rain makes aiming and firing accurately even more of a chore. Snow falls gently, blanketing the world in white, slowing movement and making everything feel quieter, more isolated. Toxic fallout turns the sky a sickly green and forces everyone indoors. A volcanic winter chills the planet and threatens your crops. These effects change how you play and create stories. There's something almost meditative about watching a gentle snow fall on your colony, knowing that your pawns are warm inside, fed, clothed, and only moderately traumatized by last week's raid. Of course, the aesthetics aren't universally beloved, and the criticisms aren't entirely wrong. The pawns are simple. They don't have hands, for starters, which some may find strangely unsettling. The animations are minimal. When a pawn walks, they sort of glide shuffle across the ground. When they fight, they stab the air in front of them until something dies. It's not fancy. But here's the thing. The art style is a deliberate choice, shaped by specific design constraints. It has to convey a huge amount of information in a tiny space. It has to balance abstraction with specificity, leaving plenty of room for players to interpret and imagine. It has to be lightweight so it runs well, loads quickly, and can be easily modded. And on all those fronts, it succeeds. The simplicity becomes a canvas. Your imagination fills the gaps. You don't see a handless pawn. You see a grizzled veteran who lost 2 fingers in a mechanoid attack and now has a grudge against all things electrical. You don't see a simple animation loop. You see a desperate struggle for survival. Rimworld's aesthetic is about looking right. It's about creating a world that's clear, functional, and just expressive enough to let your brain do the rest. It's a style that prioritizes clarity over polish, information over immersion, leaving the latter up to you. And in doing so, it becomes immersive in its own way, a way that's remained attractive for over a decade and shows no signs of getting old. So let's start from the beginning then, in a way. You've crash landed. You've got 3 survivors, all with their own personalities and neuroses, some basic supplies and a whole planet of unknown ahead of you. Now what? This is where Rimworld's gameplay kicks in, and it's deceptively simple at first. Your immediate concerns are the same ones humans have had for thousands of years. Shelter, food, temperature. Not dying to the thing with more teeth than you have bullets. Your pawns will spend their first days doing the digital equivalent of rubbing sticks together. Chopping wood, hauling steel, planting rice. Building a room with 4 walls and a roof so everyone stops sleeping on the ground like animals. Here's the thing about the initial grind though. While you're busy trying to get a basic freezer set up before your first harvest rots, the game is quietly watching and waiting. And eventually, it throws something at you. A mad rabbit, a heat wave, a raider with a knife and a grudge. And suddenly, your simple building game becomes something else entirely. That rhythm, the cycle of build and survive, is at the heart of this game. You're constantly juggling priorities. Do you research electricity first or go straight for gunsmithing? Do you accept that wanderer who wants to join even though they have chemical fascination and 0 useful skills? Do you risk sending a caravan to a neighboring settlement for medicine, knowing your defenses will be thinner while they're gone? These are the kinds of choices the game thrusts upon you. Natural pressure of a living world that doesn't care about you. And that pressure creates stories. The minute-to-minute gameplay is what you'd expect from a colony sim. You've got work priorities to set, builds to manage at crafting stations, stockpiles to organize, because somehow your steel always ends up in the freezer next to the ticking time bombs. Simple rice meals. Pawns have needs. They get hungry. They get tired. They get sad because their bedroom is ugly or because someone they didn't like died, which is a very specific kind of emotional complexity. Beneath that surface, there's a web of systems all interacting with each other. The quality of a bed affects how well a pawn sleeps. How well they sleep affects their mood. Their mood affects their chance of a mental break. A mental break might lead to them destroying a vital component. That component might be the only thing keeping your hydroponics running. Your hydroponics failing means no food. No food means worse mood, and the spiral continues. This is where Rimworld, I believe, earns its reputation. You don't win in Rimworld, at least not in your first several playthroughs. You just do it a little better each time. It's a game you learn to ride, like a mechanical bull that occasionally bursts into flames. Eventually, though, you will have to fight. Combat in Rimworld is the point where all those systems collide in the most violent and sometimes hilarious way possible. Combat is where your colony either proves its mettle or becomes a cautionary tale told on forums for years to come. Let's go over mainly ranged combat, because that's what most of your fighting will involve. Rimworld has somewhere upwards of several dozen ranged weapons, spanning from crude shortbows to charge rifles that wouldn't look out of place in a sci-fi marine's hands. Each one has its own strengths and very specific ways of disappointing you at the worst possible moment. The bolt-action rifle is your early game best friend. It's got excellent range, solid accuracy, and if you start with the crash-landed scenario, you already have it among your supplies. You want this in the hands of your best shooter, positioned somewhere with a clear line of sight, picking off enemies before they ever get close to your other pawns. It's a surgical tool. The assault rifle is the workhorse. It's not the best at anything, but it's good at everything. Decent range, decent fire rate, decent damage. If you could only have one weapon for the rest of the game, this would be it. It's the Toyota Corolla of firearms, and I mean this as the highest compliment. Then you've got your close range specialists. The heavy SMG and the chain shotgun are devastating up close, absolutely shredding enemies that get inside your perimeter. The chain shotgun in particular is technically the highest DPS weapon in the game, I think, against single targets. The catch is that you have to get close enough to use it, and getting close means exposing your pawns to return fire, grenades, and melee rushers who might just stab them in the face before the shotgun can do its job. It's a risk-reward calculation every single time. The sniper rifle is for those moments when you want to remind enemies that existence is pain from a very, very long distance away. It has the longest range in the game, incredible accuracy, and can blow off limbs with a single well-placed shot. The downside is it's slow. Your sniper might get one shot off before a raid closes to medium range or even short range, and then you're stuck with a weapon that's useless in a brawl. You need to position them carefully, protect them, and accept that they're a specialist, not a soldier. And then there's the minigun. This weapon lives in a constant state of community debate. At first glance, it's wildly inaccurate. It sprays bullets everywhere, missing more than it hits. But here's the secret. Against a large group of enemies, those misses become features. They hit other targets. They turn a crowded raid into a meat grinder. The minigun isn't for getting rid of one guy. It's for making the general direction of your colony very unhealthy to approach. At the very top of the ranged food chain, you've got the Doomsday rocket launcher and its cousin, the triple rocket launcher. These are single-use weapons, consumables really, that you acquire through trading or as quest rewards. When you use them, problems end. The Doomsday launcher creates a massive explosion with lingering fires. It's the nuclear option. It's also the easiest way to vaporize your own colony if you're not careful about positioning. There is no friendly fire exclusion in Rimworld. Your explosives will get rid of your people just as they do the enemy. Ask me how I know. But what makes ranged combat in Rimworld truly special, in my opinion, is that every shot is calculated using a complex formula that factors in the shooter's skill, the weapon's accuracy at different ranges, the target's size and movement, lighting conditions, weather, and cover. That tree your enemy is hiding behind? It's providing real mechanical cover. That sandbag your colonists are crouched behind? It's absorbing bullets that would otherwise be absorbed by, judging by my luck, the most skilled cook. You learn to think tactically. You build kill boxes to funnel enemies into fields of fire. You create fallback positions. You equip some colonists with EMP weapons for mechanoid raids and incendiary launchers for tribal chargers. You start to understand that combat is the stress test for everything you've built. And when the shooting stops, you're left with the aftermath. Wounded colonists who need treatment, maybe prosthetic replacements if things went really badly. See if you can find a questionable limb appropriation video anywhere on YouTube. Dead enemies to bury or repurpose, depending on your colony's moral compass. Loot to sort through, gear to replace, relationships to mend, because watching your friend get shot tends to put a damper on everyone's mood. Build, defend, recover, grow. Build bigger, defend harder, recover faster, grow until you can't. And somewhere in that cycle, you stop thinking about the mechanics and start living the story. Because every raid, every fight, every narrowly avoided disaster adds another chapter to your colony's history. But what are you building and fighting towards? What's the point of all of this survival, the struggle, all these black market leather cowboy hats? Rimworld does have endings, though they're almost secondary to the journey. The original victory condition involves building or finding a ship and defending it through waves of attacks until you can escape the planet. The Royalty DLC lets you curry favor with an empire until they send a shuttle to pick you up. The Ideology DLC adds a New Game Plus style ending where you sacrifice your colony piece by piece to pursue a mysterious artifact. But the truth is, most players never see those endings, I don't think. Neither have I. Most players play until the story feels complete, until the colony is stable, the threats are manageable, and they're ready to start over with a new idea, a new challenge, a new group of doomed survivors on a new planet. Because Rimworld is about more than winning. It's about seeing what happens next. Let's touch on one of the core mechanics of Rimworld now. Crafting. In the beginning of your fledgling colony, crafting is primitive, slow. You place down something called a crafting spot, which is literally just a marked square on the ground where a colonist can sit and make basic tools. A marvel of engineering, I know. It's slow. Painfully slow. The crafting spot has a work speed factor of 50%, meaning everything takes twice as long as it should. But the station is free, it's available from day one, and it lets you produce the Neolithic essentials. Bows, knives, tribal wear. It's enough to keep you alive. On the crash-landed starting scenario, you have no reason to build this over the ones you immediately have available, unless you want to train up a crafter that has no skills to begin with. This is because training is tied to length of time crafting, not number of items produced. Which means, since in the crafting spot everything takes twice as long to produce than it should, your pawn will gain twice the amount of experience for the same number of items crafted. Nifty, right? Bet you didn't know that. It's the Rimworld equivalent to an apprenticeship, minus the mentorship and plus a lot of repetitive stress injuries. Can pawns be overworked? I'm not sure, but the game will never judge you for trying to find out. The material system adds another layer. Different resources have different properties, and the game expects you to pay attention. Wood is quick to build, but becomes a fire hazard with low hit points. Steel is stronger, workable, and forms the backbone of most colonies. Plasteel is the endgame territory, incredibly durable but slow to craft with. You have to think about what you're building and why. Do you need it fast? Do you need it to survive a fire? Do you need it to look pretty? The material you choose matters. Components are the hidden bottleneck of any advanced colony. You need them for almost every electrical workstation, every piece of powered machinery, every repair thereof. In the early game, you're limited to what you can mine from compacted machinery or buy from passing traders. But eventually, you research fabrication and build a fabrication bench. Then you can start crafting your own components from steel, assuming you've got a crafter that's high enough level. It's a turning point. Once you can make your own components, your colony stops being a scavenger operation and starts being a real industrial conglomerate. But all the crafting in the world doesn't matter if your colonists are miserable. And Rimworld has a wonderfully elaborate system for tracking exactly how miserable they are at any given moment. Every colonist has a mood bar ranging from 0 to 100%. That bar is constantly moving, trying to catch up to something called the mood target, which represents the sum total of every positive and negative thought your colonist is currently experiencing. If the mood bar is below the target, it slowly rises. If it's above, it slowly falls. This lag means a sudden disaster doesn't instantly break your pawns. They have time to recover if you act fast. But it also means a slow, grinding series of problems can eventually wear them down to nothing. The actual thoughts that make up this mood percentage come from everywhere. Every action, every event, every piece of furniture generates moodlets that stack and interact. Eating a simple meal means nothing. Eating a fine meal makes a pawn feel pretty good. Give them a lavish meal and they'll be giddy for, well, until the next day. Damn, they sure are needy. But eating that meal without a table? -3 mood. Oh, the audacity, the disrespect. Hunger is one of the biggest drivers of negative mood. As a colonist's hunger drops below certain thresholds, they get increasingly upset. First it's just hungry, then very hungry, then urgently hungry, and finally If starvation sets in, malnutrition begins, with its own escalating penalties that eventually lead to premature expiry. The system is designed to make you pay attention. You can't just stockpile food and forget it. You have to manage quality, variety, and access. And sometimes food poisoning. Damn you, crispy bacon. Then there are the environmental factors. Beauty matters. A colonist in an ugly room with hideous stone walls and dirty floors will notice and complain. A colonist in a beautiful bedroom with fine carpets, sculptures, and proper lighting gets a consistent mood bonus. Comfort matters as well. Sitting in a good chair, sleeping in a good bed. These things all matter to those lovely little pawns. Outdoors matters. Colonists stuck under a roof for too long get cabin fever. Literally a mood penalty for being inside too long. You have to let them outside occasionally, which is hilarious because outside is where the raids come from. And of course, social dynamics. Colonists can form relationships. They fall in love, get married, form grudges, start fights. The death of a lover can tank a colonist's mood for days. A failed romance can leave them bitter and volatile. That being said, when mood drops low enough, you get mental breaks. There are 3 thresholds: minor, major, and extreme risk. Minor breaks might be a sad wander or a food binge. Major breaks get more serious, like a berserk rage, attacking anyone nearby, including your other colonists, your animals, your priceless equipment. Extreme breaks are exactly what they sound like. They might go catatonic or on a murderous rage. So you manage mood, you build impressive rooms, you cook elaborate meals, you give your colonists tables to eat at, you monsters. You watch their relationships, their needs, their breaking points. And when you do it right, when everything clicks, you get moments of peace, a colony that works, and a story that doesn't end in fire. But we all know, those are not the most interesting stories this game can produce. Now, this review is not a deep dive. I haven't dissected every stat, min-maxed every build, or spent 40 hours testing the exact breakpoints of the mood system against Randy's worst impulses. There are whole wikis dedicated to that level of analysis. We've walked through some major systems, touched on the spirit of the game, and tried to capture why Rimworld has consumed so many thousands of hours of so many players' lives. My perspective in this review is one from genuine enjoyment. I've played this game for years, lost colonies in spectacular fashion, and started over more times than I can count. As you've heard, there isn't much criticism here, if at all. I'm not here to nitpick. I've tried to explain why, despite all its quirks and occasional jank, Rimworld remains one of the more special games I've ever played. Because Rimworld is a game that understands something fundamental about why some of us play. I can tell you my perspective on that, which is I don't play to win. I don't play to optimize a layout or build the most efficient kill box. I play for the stories. The stories about Buck Naked, who ate without a table and burned the colony down. About the thrumbo that ate my food stockpiles and died of food poisoning. About the doctor who had to operate on his lover's spouse after the affair came to light, because he was the only one qualified and the game has a sick sense of humor. Every mechanic, every number, every hidden calculation exists to create narrative fiction. The mood system exists to make you care about your colonist's feelings. The combat exists to put those feelings at risk. The crafting exists to give you something to build and fight for. It's all connected, working together, all pushing you toward the next chapter in a story you didn't write but somehow own anyway. And sometimes those stories end badly. Sometimes the colony burns. Sometimes the last survivor wanders alone through the ashes, catatonic, broken, waiting for the next raid to finish the job. Sometimes you lose everything to a single mistake, a forgotten table, a poorly aimed rocket launcher, a Randy random who was feeling particularly spicy that day. But losing in Rimworld is rarely frustrating. It's almost always funny, because the game has this way of framing disaster as comedy. The cascade of failures, the chain reactions, the increasingly absurd sequence of events that led to your downfall. You don't rage quit. You sit back, laugh, and think about what you'll do differently next time. What colony you'll build, what story you'll tell. And there's always a next time. Rimworld's replayability is basically infinite. The random world generation ensures every map is different. The storytellers ensure every playthrough has its own rhythm. The mods, and we haven't even talked about the mods, ensure you can literally transform the game into anything you want. The modding community alone could sustain a whole separate video. Whether Rimworld is a good game or not is the wrong question to ask. The right question is, do you want to tell stories? If the answer is yes, Rimworld is definitely for you. It's a story generator, a tragedy engine, a comedy machine. It's a game where you can lose everything to a tantrum and somehow still have fun. It's a game where the most memorable moments aren't the ones the developer scripted, but the ones that emerged from the chaos of systems colliding. It's a game about people. Flawed, neurotic, occasionally murderous people who just want to survive long enough to eat a meal at a proper table. And honestly, isn't that what we all want? If you've got your own Rimworld stories you're itching to share, drop them in the comments. I'd love to read them. I want to hear what your table was. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content, and remember, always build a chair. Your colonists will thank you. Probably. Unless they're cannibals. Then they might thank you in a different way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.